Welcome to week 14, day 64 of the spring 2025 Web Technologies course. I'm Jim Kaufman with Rankin Technical College. So topics that we're going to cover today, I'm going to do a Node.js Introduction. I'll go ahead and walk through the Node.js assignments. And probably most of those I'm going to actually, you'll see the code. The code's in the assignment. It's pretty much going to be cut and paste. But, there's some concepts and things you'll have to understand how to do as far as within the Visual Studio Code. And then also later this week, and this is going to be a simple assignment. It's going to be a GitHub branch and merge assignment. And, the purpose of this is to show you, because in the real world, most of the time you're sharing a repository. So, you'll have like a team, maybe, a team of 5 developers, just throwing that out there, and you'll be sharing that repository with them. And there's going to be times that you may be working on something that, let's say there's a production fix and you need to change code for a production fix right away, but then the other developers are working on something brand new. So sometimes you'll need to create branches off your main and for certain things and then be able to merge them back to main. So that's kind of the concept there. And I'll go into that a little bit more tomorrow. But so I'm going to make another assignment for this. It should be pretty simple and easy. Just want to kind of demonstrate the concept a little bit. And then, so this is week 14. So after this week, we've got week 15 and 16. And so I'll go ahead and make all the next Monday, I'll make all the rest of the assignments viewable, and you can work on all of those whenever, time permits for you. So you'll have a React Lab 2 and 3, and a final project and a web portfolio update. So all of those 3 areas. And so I'll make them all available, and just make sure that before the end of not next week, but I guess the week after, week 15, make sure, even though you've got 2 full weeks to do everything, make sure you submit something so you're included as present for the week 15. And we'll talk about that next week. So let's go ahead and get started with the Node presentation here. Okay. So what is Node? Node is a powerful JavaScript runtime environment, and it has become a cornerstone of modern web development, empowering developers to build scalable and high-performance applications using a language they already know, JavaScript. But what is it exactly? So what is Node.js? It's at its core, Node.js is a JavaScript runtime environment built on Chrome's V8 JavaScript engine. And think of it as a way to execute JavaScript code outside of a web browser. Okay? So when you're executing Node.js, when you're executing JavaScript within a Node environment, it has really nothing to do with the browser. Okay? And we're gonna look into this here shortly. But everything's done within that environment, so you don't have certain things that you normally did. You know how we would go to developer tools in the browser and you type in document or you type in window and you'd see all of that? Well, you're not going to have that in Node. So Node has other things that's comparable. Node has what's called a global, and it also has what's called a process, and so Node does things a little bit differently, okay? Traditionally, Node is a, more recent project. I think it's been 2009 now, but, in terms of the internet, as far as the internet itself, for the longest time, people are still using, JavaScript mainly for front-end stuff. But, here in recent years, with the availability, introduction of Node, people are using JavaScript on the server side. So what we've kind of done in this course is we've been doing all the front end stuff, right? We're not doing any back end stuff. Well, Node is for the back end, okay? So that's kind of the difference between, from a JavaScript perspective, just using JavaScript, how we have been in this course. It's all been for front end. But with Node, we're also being able to use JavaScript on the back end as well, right? All right. And, kind of interesting thing, Node has changed, this by allowing developers to use JavaScript for server-side scripting, some command line tools. So we're going to be doing a lot of command line stuff here today. We haven't done much of that. Even in our C# course, we were using the Visual Studio Code community version. So we're executing everything within the IDE, but we're going to be doing some things on the command line. So that's going to be a good introduction for you guys for that. That's important for developers to really get used to using the command line for things. The other thing that's kind of interesting is, it's also, Node can be used for desktop applications as well. Okay. Not that I've done anything with that, but just a kind of a note on that. And we're not going to look at that, but just something to keep in mind. It's possible. So how does Node work? So Node has what's called an event loop. It has an event loop. It's single threaded, and it has non-blocking I/O, which I/O stands for input output. And so let's kind of go through what that kind of means. So single threaded, Node.js has one main worker thread that executes all your Java code. It handles tasks one by one in sequence on this main thread. Okay, and you can compare that. There's other technologies that use what's called multi-threaded. Single-threaded is a lot easier of a concept to understand, and as far as what needs to be done, it's much simpler. When you start talking about multi-threads, so we're talking about multiple requests coming in. So let's say you have a web application, and it's being hit at one time by 1,000 different people at one time. So you have to be careful sometimes with like single-threaded situations, because when multiple things come in at the same time, it can really bog things down. Now, Node has some ways to handle that. Okay. Now, a multi-threaded environment can be a lot more performant for that. Performance can be a lot better when you have a multi-threaded environment. But in that case, there's a lot more things you have to do to handle that as well. So it's actually multi-thread environment is much more complex. Okay. But like I said, it handles tasks one by one in sequence on this main thread. And it's non-blocking. So when Node needs to do something slow, because Node can do things like reading a file, it can query a database, it can do lots of other things. It'll start this task, but it don't wait for it to finish. And it immediately moves on to the next instruction. It gets notified later when basically the slow task is complete. This keeps the single thread from getting stuck waiting. Okay, and let me kind of give you an example of kind of a real world analogy here. So let's just say let's look at a restaurant, and maybe a sit down restaurant where you have either a waiter or waitress. So you go into a restaurant, you sit down at the table, and waitress comes to take your order, and just for demonstration purposes, figure that they're just taking your full order, drinks and everything. So you order your drinks, you order your food. Maybe you order your entrees. It comes with a salad, etc. Maybe also there's rolls that come with part of the meal. So you have these different things in this order, right? Well, okay. So now this waitress or waiter takes that order. And usually they're going to go ahead and submit that to the kitchen, right? So when they submit that to the kitchen, that waitress or waiter don't submit that and then just sit there and wait for that to get done, right? And like I said, since you also had drinks and salads and rolls, which a lot of times that's done differently from what the cook does, right? So you would submit your order to the cook, and you don't wait for your cook to get that food done. You go ahead and do other tasks, right? You go get the drinks, you get the salads, you get the rolls, right? You bring that back. Let's say also some other customers come in and sit down. So the same waitress and waiter may go take their order, So this is kind of an analogy on how this kind of works, right? So that's kind of the non-blocking thing. It doesn't sit there and wait for it to be finished. It moves on to the next thing, okay? And then it will get notified when, and in a lot of restaurants, you might have some kind of a coordinator or other helpers that help with the salads, the drinks, etc. So so the waiter be notified when that task is complete. So obviously, from a perspective of a cook, the order would come up in the window. They usually have a window where all the food is. And the waitress or waiter would be contacted and would bring the food to the table, right? Just kind of a quick little analogy there on that. So also, Node.js has this idea of a event loop. This is like Node's manager or dispatcher, and it constantly checks. And in the example I was making there, kind of like maybe like a coordinator or something, it checks if any of those flow non-blocking tasks have been finished. When the task completes, the main thread is free, and the event loop takes the finished task results, and any associated code and callbacks, and we'll talk about callbacks here in a minute, and gives it to the main thread to run. This is how Node handles many operations concurrently without multiple threads. Okay. So it has this idea of this event loop. It has this idea of using these callbacks, so that you can continue to do other things until the callback comes back, and then you go ahead and process that callback. Okay. Also, Node has this idea of has this tool called NPM, which is Node Package Manager, and Node has a very massive ecosystem of reusable code packages that are available to use. This makes it incredibly easy for developers to find and integrate libraries and frameworks for various functionalities. And reduces boilerplate code. So you just kind of bring this in. Same thing as kind of what we did with Bootstrap, right? We bring in this other package, Bootstrap. And actually you can import Bootstrap from the Node Package Manager as well. This would be more important when we're, doing kind of not the server side stuff, the front end stuff part. When we do React stuff, we're using we're using Bootstrap on the React side, which is React is going to be your front end. Node's going to be your back end. Okay. But Node and React, they all fit together, right? And I kind of really forgot to mention from the beginning here. So this is kind of what we're going to be doing here. What we're doing here is kind of, besides it just being an introduction to Node, Node is part of the MERN stack. And so this is actually the second year course, the first part, which is the web database driven 1 course, which is the MERN stack. And the MERN stack stands for Mongo, which is the database, E for Express, which is a kind of a routing thing, and it integrates with the Node.js. And then R would be, in MERN, R would be React, and N would be Node. And that's what the MERN stack is: Mongo, Express, React, and Node. Okay, and Node is vital in that whole stack. Okay. Okay. So Node has gained widespread adoption across various industries. So a lot of large tech companies, Netflix, LinkedIn, PayPal, Uber, Walmart, Microsoft, etc., utilize Node for various parts of their infrastructure due to its scalability and performance. It's good for rapidly doing some things. So for startups, it's a rapid development capabilities and large open source community make it a attractive choice for startups looking to build and iterate quickly. And it's just saying basically here, companies of all sizes, from small businesses to large enterprises, Node is used for building web servers, APIs, real-time applications, microservices, and more. And some of the stuff you know may not have a good handle on yet, but we as far as a web server is concerned, we talked earlier in this course, at the very beginning of this course, a web server it's kind of like two different things. One, it's the hardware, right? We look at the web server being this box, like a computer, that's the web server, right? But then we also look at there's web server software. Well, Node would be, in this case, would be the web server software, right? API is an application programming interface. We'll go into that a little bit more tomorrow, okay? So also a real-time application. So a real-time application be something like maybe a thing that's you're providing information to a user, financial information, stock market information, so right now the stock market's open at this time, and so it's maybe returning, you put in a quote and it'll return the current value, the current price of that stock, right? That'd be kind of a real-time application. Or maybe cryptocurrency prices are constantly changing, and you could have a dashboard where it's constantly updating, right? So that's another good use for Node.js as well. And microservices, we'll talk about that more in the future. So why would companies use Node? We kind of mentioned that a little bit already, but a lot of times one good thing about JavaScript or about Node is Node is JavaScript, whereas if you've already got developers on the front end, so then they can also do the back end, right? If they know JavaScript, they know it's easier for them to do end-to-end development, right? Full stack development. Using JavaScript for both the front end and the back end allows for code sharing, a unified development team, and a smoother workflow. Developers can leverage their existing JavaScript skills across the entire application stack. High performance. The non-blocking event-driven architecture enables Node applications to handle a large number of concurrent connections with minimal resource consumption, making them highly scalable. Real-time applications. It's well suited for building real-time applications. Well, yeah, like chat applications, online gaming platforms. My examples were kind of from a business standpoint. Maybe this kind of a stock application where you're getting stock prices or cryptocurrency prices. And it also has a large community. The vast and active Node.js community contributes a wealth of open source libraries, frameworks, and tools, providing developers with readily available solutions and support. Also, rapid development, NPM, which stands for Node Package Manager, and the abundance of reusable packages significantly speed up the development process, allowing teams to build and deploy applications faster. Microservice architecture, Node's lightweight nature makes it a popular choice for building microservices. And just real quick on microservices. So the whole idea really behind microservices is you're writing a small little service or a small little application that just takes care of one thing. So instead of having, sometimes you have these big long files where you're doing all kinds of different things. You're doing this, then you're doing that. Microservices is just a way to break that up so that it has like one function. It takes care of that function. So you have all kinds of these small microservices that go do different things, okay? And then you just kind of orchestrate that, and you have something to control that, right? Another thing is it's very cost effective. The ability to use a single language across the stack and the efficiency of event-driven model can contribute to lower development and infrastructure cost. Okay. So in conclusion, and this is, just a very quick, brief introduction today. We're not going to be doing a lot for Node and get into many things that are very complicated. Most of the assignments are just going to be cut and paste. You just need to understand a few things to make sure you can get the assignments done. We'll go into much more in-depth Node concepts in the second year, the first course of the second year in this program. But Node is a powerful and versatile JavaScript runtime environment. It's known for its non-blocking model, event loop, and its vast ecosystem. And the ability to leverage JavaScript across the entire stack provides an advantage in terms of development efficiency, team collaboration, and making it a key technology in the modern software landscape. All right, I know I kind of went through that pretty fast. All right, so let's look at some of the assignments here. So here, I just kind of want to come up with something so you guys can spend a little time researching and learning a little bit on your own and be able to sorry, I've got something popped up. I know you can't see it, but it's kind of in my way here. All right. So there's I did this both for React and Node. So I've got this kind of little assignment where you just go ahead and download this file, file download it, and then go ahead and come in here and answer these questions. And so here's some official documentation that's available. I think I just put that for each one of these. And, this is, and then you can also, so here's Introduction to Node.js. This is the Node.js official site. Okay. And so you can just use that, or you can use any other resources. Just come in here and just do this and, just answer these questions. Type in the question. So this is just freehand. So answer these questions. Just kind of, the idea about this, just get a little bit of an idea about some of this stuff. So, what is Node.js? It kind of explains that. What's a common misconception about it? Go ahead and research that a little bit, okay? So just go through each one of these. Do your best to answer these questions. Please, try to spend a little bit of time and do some reading. You're not going to learn. This would take a long time. Obviously, to become very good at Node takes quite a bit of time, right? I just want you to answer these questions. Try to gather a little bit of knowledge. Do a little bit of reading. Okay, that's kind of the purpose here. Don't get too stressed out about it. Maybe one or two sentences on each thing, on each question, and that's about it. Okay. And this is going to be kind of in line a little bit what we're going to be doing here. When I go ahead and go through these exercises as well, these other, the lab and the assignments as far as within Visual Studio. So here's the lab assignment for this. So the first thing you want to do, and if you guys, the guys who are online right now, if you guys want to go ahead and download and install Node, you can go ahead and do this. If you don't have this right there out here, I'll put this in the chat real quick. If you're not right there now. So first, just go ahead and download Node. Go to the website on the front, on the home page there. You're going to see the Node. Let me just go to the front page here. You'll have this download Node.js LTS. So just go ahead and click that, and that's will download this. It's an executable. Double click and install that executable. And then after you're done with that, once you've installed that, you should be able to go to the a command prompt and just type in Node, and it should say welcome to Node. Okay. And also you can do Node-V, and I'll tell you your version. I have a little bit older version. I need to update mine. But that's that. Okay, so there's going to be 4 parts here for this assignment. So, in your repository, your local repository, go ahead and create a new folder called Node.js, and under that, create 4 different folders: Part 1, Part 2, Part 3, and Part 4. And then, so each one here, so Part 1 is going to be modules. And this kind of aligns a little bit with the homework assignment as far as the fill in the blank for the different concepts there, the questions. So we're going to work. Part 1 is modules. Part 2 is event loop. 3 is binary data and file system. And the 4th one is a web server. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up that first Part 1 project here. Let me get to that here. Okay. So go ahead and have a Node.js folder in there, Part 1 and through Part 4. I'm just going to open up the first one. Before I do that here, let me show you. You can have this all in one if you want to open this all together. But the problem with doing that, it can become kind of confusing because each one of these is going to be a separate kind of application. They're going to have a separate package.xml, package.json file. And, you're going to have to run some things command line. If you get confused where you're at, it can be a little confusing because, have to make sure that you have your terminal. We're going to be using terminals. You have to make sure you're in the right one. So it's kind of a lot simpler just to do these one by one. So I'm just going to do this first one here. And for now, I'm going to go ahead and delete this. So these are basically the different files that in that lab it tells you go ahead and create. Okay, I'm going to delete this for right now, and I'm going to delete this one so I can kind of start this from the beginning. So when you come in here, so obviously you come in here, you're not going to have any files at all, right? I've already got these files there. But you come in here, go up to the top and go to terminal. So you're just going to have your things, you just say Part 1 up here and that's it. So come up here to terminal and click on new terminal. And obviously this is going to be the full path of where, you have your repository and basically all the way down to your Part 1 folder, right? So the first thing you're going to want to do in here is you're going to want to go ahead and create a node project. And to create a node project, you use that npm, which is the node package manager. Okay, so you go npm and you do init, which is npm init, and go ahead and click enter. And what this is going to do is just going to create that package.json file. Okay, and it's basically just initializing a new node project. Okay, and it's going to have a bunch of questions. So in here you can If you want, it'll ask, so package name, if you just want to accept the default, you can hit the enter key in each one of these. So that for part one, I just hit enter. Version, I'm going to just hit enter on there. Description, my first Node app. Okay. Entry point. So here I'm going to go ahead, just because I already have this. It's talking about my entry point being modules, but I'm going to change that. So when you come in here, if you don't have any files here, right? If you don't have any files here, this is just going to be empty. It's going to probably say index. It'll say index.js because that's kind of the default one. And so this will just this is just kind of the default main entry point into your application. You can still execute other files, okay? But it's going to default to index.js if you don't have anything already in there. And so let's just go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and change mine to index.js because I'm going to create an index.js file because I want to show you a couple things, okay? Test command, I'm just going to skip that. So I'm just going to hit the enter key, get repository, I'm going to skip that. Keywords, author, I'll go ahead and put in my name. I'm just going to go ahead and do that. In the real world, you know, you're probably going to want to fill some of these out for different reasons. Especially like, you know, you can actually create, you know, some people create their own modules for the Node Package Manager, that whole repository, the Node Package Manager. You can create your own modules that other people can use, right? So you do things like that. You want to make sure you have all the things. So license, I'm going to put MIT, make sure it's all uppercase. If you put in lowercase, it's going to complain. It's not going to work. So you need to put that all uppercase like that. Is this okay? You just hit the enter key. You don't have to type in yes or that. And you just hit the enter key. And it's going to create this package.json file. Okay? So here's all the different things that we basically put in our thing. It puts this test thing by default. You don't have to worry about that. But the name was part one. We just kind of accepted some of these by default. Our description, here's our main entry point into our application, etc. Okay? And as you remember for JSON, you're going to have the way it is, the structure is obviously curly brace, open and close, and you have name value pairs, right? With commas to separate those. Okay? So that's one thing is whenever you edit this, because this is one you will edit at times. Just make sure that you follow, you do it correctly and have, you're going to have to always do the name value pair like that. And if you add one, it's not the last one. You don't have to you don't put a comma after the last one, but if you do enter somewhere in the middle of here, you're going to have to make sure you have a comma after that line. Okay. So now we have that. So I'm going to go in here next, and I'm just going to go ahead and create a new file called index.js. Okay. And in here, I'm just going to do a console.log. I'm not going to do that one. Okay. I'm going to do... all right. So here's just a basic a console, right? So the Node.js does use console, right? But certain things you can't do, okay? Here, let's just run this, though. I'll show you how to run this. So now we got index.js. So if we come down here to our terminal, and we type in node, and just index, and hit enter key. As you can see, it printed out my first Node app. Okay, it's running the console within the terminal. Okay. Now we were kind of talking about that. This is run outside of a browser environment. So like like if we did something like this within the browser, right? we did something like this in the browser here. All right. So if we do something like this in the browser, we're gonna have a document object, right? We're gonna see that. But here, Node does not have that, right? We're not running in the browser. So if I go ahead and run this, it's gonna complain. Document is not defined, right? Same thing with window. We also had a window object within the browser. And so that's also another one that's not defined. We run that. Same thing there. Window's not defined. Okay. We'll fix that. Make sure it's running. Okay. A couple things about the terminal here. So always make sure when you're running things, sometimes, you know, little things that you might encounter, you're going to encounter different things. One thing you might encounter, one thing you will encounter is, you know, make sure, you know, we all do it. You know, it's easy for being in the wrong directory. When we start building some applications, we won't be doing a lot here with different folders, with the Node, you know, these Node assignments, but the React stuff will have some more folders. And also, you know, when we start really getting into this in the second year course, you're going to have a lot more folders. You need to make sure when you're executing something, so like here on this part 1, so for you to be executing something, you need to make sure you've got the package.json file in that directory, right? So that package.json file, if you can't even hover over that, it'll show you where it's at, right? You need to make sure that that is in the right directory, in that right directory. It's easy sometimes when you have multiple directories to be in the wrong one. And if you try to run things and it's in the wrong directory, it's just not going to work, right? So that's one thing. Another thing is you start getting a lot of statements in here. To go ahead and clear that, do CLS, and that'll clear the other statements. And another thing, especially when we start doing React and we are you know, just when we actually start creating web servers. When we create a web server or use a web server, and when we execute that within the thing to fire up a web server, you have to be careful about how many terminals you have running. Sometimes you can have something running in one terminal and then you try to fire, like you're using a certain port number, and we'll look at that here in a little bit. But if you're using a port number, you have it fire, you already have it running, and then all of a sudden you end up having a new terminal, and this is going to happen to you, I guarantee. You're going to have another terminal, you're going to be trying to fire that thing up again, and it's going to fail because it's going to say that port's already being used. So you got to really watch how many terminals. You don't need. You should probably work on killing these. You know, deleting these. Okay, when you're not using them. Okay. All right, so that's that. So let's go ahead and so the first part of that assignment. Let's look at that. I'm just going to bring this up on my other side here. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is this module thing. So basically, you're just cut and pasting this code, right? And I'm going to explain to you kind of what this means a little bit. So you got this module.js, a module.js file and a module utils. So the module utils.js is basically the function, okay? You've got a function in here, and then you're exporting this. So the whole thing about these Node is kind of really all about different kinds of modules. So when you can write, you know, you want to write your code in separate modules with separate functions so that you can call that in. It can be reusable, and so you don't want to just put everything all in one file, right? So in this case, we're creating a module that's going to be a greet one, a greet function. Okay, and so this also is kind of the traditional way for modules. The traditional way with Node.js is using what's called CommonJS, and that's the kind of the more traditional module way. And then there's a newer way, which is ES modules. Okay, and so we're going to look at both of them here. So this is the more traditional way to do this, and this is how you actually export this. This is how you export this function. So when it gets called in by another file, okay, it will be there. For right now, let me close these up. All right. So we got module.js. And what you do is you use this require. And this is the, like I said, this is the more traditional way. And I'm really going to stress that, you know, I'm just showing you it because you're going to see a lot of code. Even if you look at the documentation on Node, you're going to see a lot of it using this. But, you know, it's actually telling you, even within the editor here, that there's a new way. So if you'll see these little 3 dots under like R here, and it's going to say file is a CommonJS module. It may be converted to an ES module. And this is kind of a hint saying, hey, you know, it's kind of a better way. It's better to use the ES modules than this. They will work, but you obviously have to make sure that you're consistent, whatever you're doing. You don't want to be using one kind of module, try to use one module in one file and another kind of modules in the other files, right? So you want to be consistent. But like I said, this is the traditional way, and this is how you go ahead and basically pull in, so to speak, import a different file, right? So you're bringing in this module.utils, and then utils.greet, and then you're passing this value, okay? So basically, here on the command line, right, we can just do node, and we want to do node.modules, right? And as you can see, it says, hello, Node.js developer. Okay, so this was like I said, the traditional way to do this. Okay, and now I'm going to show you the other way. So you can, let me change something here. So there's this MJS, means module.js. Let's get rid of that for now. I just want to show you, because I don't want to confuse you with this too much, but there's just kind of like different ways and to do things. Yes. All right. So here, now if I have this, so I'm doing this a different way. So I'm doing the module ES is kind of similar to this, right? Except that the import is different. This is how you import this the traditional way. This is how you import this using the ES modules, okay? And this is the preferred way to do this. But let me show you what happens when we try to, especially because I changed that from a JS file to a MJS file, okay? So if I go ahead and try to run this now, I'm going to run node. Not that one. I want to run that one. So cannot use import statement outside a module. Okay, cannot. Let me make sure that this is right though. So you got that one, that one. Okay. So basically, cannot use import statement outside a module. So you have to define this. There's 2 different ways to actually define this as a module. Okay. So first, you can go in here in the package, and you can go ahead and do. You can do type. Okay. And here you would do type module and save this. Okay. Now, if I come over here, run this. Okay, cannot find module because I'm probably rewording things, JS. It's just because I'm rewording stuff and it's cached that. That's probably why I shouldn't have done it like that, actually. Even though it changed it. Let me just close this and reopen this again. Let me reopen this. And another thing here in the terminal, you can use up and if you already have commands there, it keeps a history of things. So it included that history there, right? Module not found. So what's it say in that not found? It still has this part1.mjs file. I don't have it called that anymore. Did I define it in here? No. Why is this doing this to me? I probably shouldn't have done that like that. I don't know where it's holding on to that at. This doesn't matter. It's just a comment. That shouldn't matter at all. Yeah, I'm sorry. Probably shouldn't have done it like I did to do that there. So let me just explain what I was trying to do here. I don't want to rework all this right now. What I was trying to do is explain there's kind of two different, when you use the modules where you want to do the ES modules for the imports, okay? There's basically kind of two different ways you can, for it to work, is you can define your file having the MJS extension. Or if it doesn't have an MJ extension, just the JS extension, you can go into package here and add type equals module. But since I went ahead and put these back to the MJS, so if I go ahead and delete this now, this still should work. So I was just trying to demonstrate it. From my perspective, I would just say, just go ahead and use the MJS extension. So probably the reason for that Node would want you to do it this way is so it's obvious that you're using, by looking at MJS, you can tell, oh yeah, I'm using ES modules. I'm not using common.js. Otherwise, you'd have to kind of almost look at the code to figure out if what kind of modules you were using. Okay. But go ahead and follow what it's follow for the modules part 1. Just go ahead and follow what it says in there, and you'll be good. Okay. So just to kind of recap, two different ways. You got the common JS and you got ES modules. The easiest way to make sure that that you can use the import for the modules is to using this kind of import statement, and is just to go ahead and have the extension MJS. That's the easiest way. And also, you just wanted to point out, especially you start looking at, you can look at Node's documentation. Also, different examples on the internet. You're going to see a lot where they're using the older kind, right? The older one. So whenever you open up a file, you see require, it's going to, that should be a, that indicates that basically you're using common.js. If you open up a file and you see the import statement, you're using the ES modules. Okay. The next one here I want to open up is the part 2. So this is an event loop. This has some functions. This has some functions that it's going to kind of demonstrate a little bit how this works. So as you can see here, we've got a console log start and a console log end, and we have some other functions in between here. So these things will be printed out. So these things this will execute, right? So first, this is going to go line by line when you execute this file. Then it's going to go here. It's going to go here. And then here, right? One at a time. But as far as the console log file, the console log statements, these are not going to be necessarily done in order, okay? So let's go ahead and kind of take a quick look at that. And these use what's called the callback function. So this is a callback function. So you're calling a set timeout function that already exists, okay? You're not creating a new one. This already exists. This exists both in JavaScript, and Node.js does something just a little bit different with that, but it's basically pretty close to the same thing. So it has a set timeouts, basically a JavaScript function that's available. And as you can see, it takes a callback. When I hover over that, it takes a callback. And so the callback function, this is your callback function. Your callback function is just saying, hey, log out this statement, okay? Log this statement. Same thing with all of these. The callback function is the callback function for each one of these. So set immediate. This is a Node.js specific type of function, okay? And it does have a callback, okay? And then here is process.nextTick, and this is also a Node.js process type function, okay? And it also has a callback, and then our callback is going to be this console.log, okay? And then you have this console.log end. So just looking at this, it's easy to think that maybe it's going to go ahead and print this one, and then print this one, and keep going through these, and then print this one at the end. But that's not going to be the case. Actually, what's going to happen here is it's going to print out start, then it's going to go ahead and print out end. These other ones will be executed differently. So let's just kind of look at this real quick. So I'm going to put a lot of breakpoints here. Okay, we'll skip those. And then I'm going to just go ahead and run this. So I'm going to open up a terminal. New terminal. And so for this assignment, just go ahead and do I already have it here, but do the same thing as you did. And I could just kind of do this. It doesn't really matter. Might as well just do it again. I'm going to delete this for now. And just go ahead and do npm init. So obviously, like the previous part 1 thing, you're not going to have any files when you come in here in the beginning. Just go ahead and do npm init. If for some reason you ever have files, like I already have one, it will take it's basically just using the existing files as now that's your node project, right? If you already have some. If you don't, it's just going to create a new one from scratch. So the same thing here. I'm just going to accept all these defaults here. It's got an entry point since it already knows it. It's reading that. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm fine with that. All right. I'll go ahead and put in my author, put in my license MIT. Yes, that's good. So we're back to where basically I was before, but just kind of want to point that out. And then obviously you can use CLS for clearing the screen. And like I said, you can use up arrows to go to previous things you did, right? We're in a different part now, but it's just going to have everything you ever did. So here's some other things I did before even our class started. So, but just to point that out. Okay, so here I want to go ahead and run this. So I'm going to do node, and then I'm going to do E. And then here's another thing is you can actually hit like tab here, right? If you have multiple files, it's going to go ahead If you have multiple files started with the same name, it's going to go ahead and kind of iterate through them until you just decide on one. But here this node, I'm just going to run this, okay? I'll run it once without the debugger, and then we're going to run it with the debugger. So here's enter. As you can see, it went from start to end, okay? And then it ran these others. Next tick, which wasn't the next one in the list. Actually, next tick is right here. Okay, this is a special function within the whole within the whole event loop. Okay, it's a special process within the event loop, and so usually this is going to always be called next. Even you could add a whole bunch of things in here. If you have the next tick, it's usually going to run that next. Okay, that's why it says next, I guess, huh? And actually, the thing that called last here was immediate callback. I can almost change this, though. So here, I got the set timeout. This is actually a 0. But even though it's a 0 for that, it's still going to kind of execute that as a timeout, even though it's 0. There's kind of I guess a little bit of hesitation there, because you're setting a timeout even though you didn't have a number there. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. But here I'm going to change this to something bigger. It's in milliseconds, 5,000 milliseconds. I'm going to save this. Now if I run this again, let's see where timeout runs. So in the previous execution, we had timeout, callback, and then immediate. And this time it's waiting for timeout to finish. Boom, and there. Now it's going to be timeout callback. Also, if I even put this back to 0, if I run this enough times, sometimes, come on, there, did it? No. Sometimes it'll, you got to catch it in the right time. Sometimes it'll do immediate before timeout, and sometimes it'll do timeout, it could change order. It's not guaranteed in some circumstances. I don't think immediate's guaranteed. Okay. So let's go ahead and look at this again. Let me clear my screen here. So I want to do this in the debugger here. So let me go ahead and I'm going to hit the F5 key. I probably have mine already kind of configured, but I guess it's not. So I'm going to click Node.js for my debugger. So I hit the F5 key, and I'm going to choose Node.js for my debugger. Okay, and it's going to go to my very first breakpoint, which is the timeout. Obviously, actually, it already. So here's start. So it already executed the first line. I could have put a breakpoint there. I didn't. Here, let me just redo that real quick. Let's just go ahead and put one at every line here. Let me go ahead and just cancel that, and let's just run this again. Hit that F5 key. It's automatic. Once you've got the debugger kind of initialized, and you hit F5 key, it's just going to use the same one it did before. So the first thing it's going to do is this console.start. I'm going to continue. Okay, and then it's going to call this next line, and I have it here with the callback too, and so it's not going to execute this. This doesn't get executed, right? It starts this set.timeout, but it doesn't finish. And kind of back to when kind of doing that introduction when we kind of had an example of the waitress taking an order, waitress or waiter taking an order. So. And this kind of follows that example, whereas, look at the set timeout being the order they gave to the cook. Well, we gave it to the cook. We got other things we need to do. So go, in this case, our set timeout, is the first thing we're trying to do here, but it's not ready. It hasn't gave it anything back yet, right? So the next thing is the set immediate. It's going to start this, but it's not going to return anything at this point in time, right? Same thing there. Same thing with next tick. Then it's going to go ahead and do your console.end. So both the console.start and the console.end are considered synchronous executions. So it's going to execute there are statements that are synchronous, and so that's going to execute first. So it's going to do the start and the end, and then after that, I just click the next, and it's going to this next tick. All right, this is kind of part, and you don't have to understand all of this right now. I know that there's a lot involved here, and we'll learn more about this in the second year. I'm just kind of showing you a little bit, and probably the concept I just really want you to understand is there's an event loop, and that when you have callback functions, you don't always execute everything within that function. Other things can happen within this event loop where it's executing other things than what you think it would be just by looking at the screen. Okay. So now it's gonna execute that one. Now it's coming up to the timeout and executing this one. And the reason now is because it's in debug mode. And even though it's in debug mode, that timer already it already went through that. Even if I make this greater than that, we'll do one with one greater. The timer's already finished, right? Even though we have it in debug mode, we didn't stop the timer, okay? We just stopped it right here at these different points. And I'll change that. I'm almost sure that that's going to be correct, but we'll change that just to take another look at that real quick. So now it's going to do the set timeout one. Then it's coming to set immediate, and it's finished. Okay, so here, just for fun, let's change this. It's worth just kind of seeing how this operates a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and run this again. So this is an event. Okay, F5. So we did our start. We did our timeout. A little bit of a delay. As you remember, the first time we ran this just without the debugger, everything else executed, and we had a little delay until the timer elapsed. So in this case, I don't think that that's going to happen because right now I think that timer is executing still, right? And that's kind of the purpose of this, right? The time you've got this event that's taking place, it's executing something. And probably right now it's already ready to come back, okay? But we haven't passed, it hasn't been passed in yet. So then we're going to do that. Here's our next tick. We're going to do our end. Now we go to our next tick. Now we come back to our console because our timer executed already. The 5 seconds went by. The 5,000 is basically 5 seconds, right? So there you go. So that's the event loop. One. Let's go ahead and take a few minutes here. Okay, so for part 3, it's doing binary files, doing file import. Okay, so kind of same thing here. I'm just going to delete this. Not that this is hard to do, just kind of, might as well just kind of get used to doing this. I know it's a little redundant in this case. Sometimes these creating the package.json file, you put maybe a little bit more things in there. And I'm gonna show you a little bit here more on that in the future. Here on this, actually on the part 4 one. We'll do new terminal here. Like I said, just to reiterate, here it's not a big deal. We're kind of only got one folder. You got multiple folders. Always make sure you're in the right folder before you try to run things. So here I'm just going to do the same thing. We're going to just go through this, part 3. Entry point, test command. All right. So here, let's see. So we don't have, I can actually probably show you. Let me just run this. I just want to make sure. Okay, and this is what I expect. Good. So I can actually show you the whole thing I was trying to show you with the modules earlier. So first of all, so this kind of a module is a node module, okay? Not to confuse things here, but when you're creating your own files and you're trying to import your own files in, right? It's kind of like, you know, you can be doing that either using the older way or the newer way, right? So that's kind of one aspect of modules. It's kind of the modules you create yourself, right? Kind of different, I don't want to say types, but different classifications. The ones that you create yourself, that's one. The other is that there's some built-in node modules, okay? And this one here is a built-in node modules, and you can tell that because it has that just like that. This is a built-in node module, okay? And then the other kind is, we were talking about that node package manager, and there's that special repository, and we'll take a look at that here in a few minutes. And that's some third-party type modules you can bring into your code, right? So you have the modules that you kind of create yourself. You have the built-in ones that Node provides. And then also you have ones that are third-party that you can use as well, okay? Now back to this. Now here, all of a sudden we can't do this because it's complaining about this import, right? Cannot use import outside a module. So one way to do this, okay, is to go ahead and do type here and then do module. And like I said earlier, make sure whenever you add something, you always have there's a comma at the end, okay? Now if I run this, it'll work, okay? Or like I said, like the other one, I can change that to MJS, and that way, if I do that, I don't have to put that in here, okay? Things have kind of evolved, and the reason for that, I don't want to confuse everyone, but everybody used the common.js files. Then all of a sudden they said, okay, well let's start using these ES modules, but they didn't have the MJS extension. You had to put the type.module, right? And it's kind of evolved, so to speak. And then like now probably the newest way, the newest and easiest way is use the MJS extension. And that helps for, really, it doesn't make a difference as far as how it's kind of executed. It's just pretty much telling you, by you looking at, as far as I know, I could be wrong on that, but as far as I know, the MJS is just saying, hey, it's making it saying, hey, this is an ES module. And that way you don't have to put anything in here. And then just by looking at the extension, it's using ES modules as opposed to common.js. Okay. And then basically here you're just creating a buffer. Okay. And we're printing out the buffer. And so an important thing here on this is that what you're doing here, that's obviously different than what we've been able to do with JavaScript in the browser. You can't write files with JavaScript in the browser, right? But with Node and using this package, this FS package, right? File system package, you can actually write files. And that's what we're doing here. We're actually writing a file to this directory. It could be written to a different directory as well, but it makes sense just to keep it here. So we're writing hello buffer. So that's what this is doing. This hello buffer is your new buffer, and it's writing that, it's taking that data and it's writing that to this file. And then this part is the read file, and it's actually just reading reading this file and printing out the data in that file. So you've got a write and a read. Not too much I want to go through on this. I don't want to get into, no reason to get too I don't want to dig too far into this and cause confusion about things. So, but just kind of showing you that, hey, you can write files. And this is a way you can write files and read files. Okay. And so just follow the directions that are in the lab and you'll be good to go on this. All right. The fourth one. So here I got a few different things. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to get rid of a few things here. Obviously, you're going to come in here and not going to have anything. I'm going to get rid of that because I want to show you these things. And I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to get rid of all this, I think. Yeah, let me get rid of all this. Okay, so this is what it tells you in the lab assignment to do. And so here you're doing a, so we got the MJS, right? So we've got the MJS, which is a module. We're doing an import. So obviously this is another Node module, and built-in Node module called HTTP. Okay, and we're also importing something else here. This is not a Node module. This is a third-party module. Okay, now the built-in modules, the Node built-in modules, we just use them. We don't have to bring them into our applications, so to speak. They're available for us to use. Okay. Now the second one here, the .env one, this is something you actually have to bring in. So let's just go and how we've been kind of creating all of these in the first place. Let's just go ahead and run npm init and create our thing here. Let's go through this. I'm just going to go through all of it. All right. Now we have our package. Okay. And just for fun here, I'm just going to go ahead and try to, let me do a clear our screen here, CLS to clear the screen. And I'm just going to try to run this thing. It's going to fail, but I'll show you what you need to do to fix this. So we're trying to run this. And the first thing it's doing, cannot find package.env. Okay, can't find that. That's expected. So we have to bring this in. So how we do this is we basically do npm install, and we do .env. So what this is going to do, let me just bring this up in the browser. Let me show you where it's going to grab this at before we even run it. So this npmjs.com, these are all the different packages. Okay. But there, there's a repository. It's kind of built in within Node.js. It knows where to go to get it. Okay. But basically you can look at all the different packages in here. So if I look at .env, hit search here. This is the exact match. What it is actually grabbing this package. Okay, it's grabbing this package. Obviously, this is a package. There's tons of packages, right? For different uses. Okay, the .env is going to allow you to create environment variables, so that you can create environment. Put different pieces of data in there that you might need to use within a file, and you can use the .env for that. Okay. Now this one is a very popular one. Look at how many, 197 million, right? So this is very significantly powerful, popular. And one thing I would do is if you're ever playing around, you can play around with different modules. I try not to use things that don't have a big following. I know that they do some security type things, but I try not to use things that don't have a big following because anybody can basically publish things out here, right? The ones that are very popular to have a big following, I tend to try to gravitate towards them and not the others. Okay, but the .env is a very popular one to use. Okay, and obviously there's lots of others, and this is one that I'm going to actually show you. That is a very popular one as well. You got about 30 million. Now this one here, you used to have to use this. Like if you created a web server, that's what the part 4 is. Create a web server. If you update anything there, if you don't use NodeMon, you'd have to restart your server every time to pick up your change. Every time you hit a change, kind of like how we use Live Server, and you can make a change and it'll pick up your change. Well, NodeMon does the same thing. Okay, if without NodeMon, you used to have to restart your server every time. Okay, but now there's a different approach to do it where we can actually skip NodeMon at all. But I am going to bring this into our project, our part 4, just to show you all of the things that come in as part of grabbing this package, using this package. Okay. So right here, we're going to do the npm install.env. Okay, and that quickly, it went ahead and grabbed that. And what it does is going to create this node modules directory, and it's going to include .env here. Okay, now some of these frameworks are not frameworks. Some of these packages, this .env isn't bringing in a lot here, but some of these packages have other packages that they rely on, or dependencies, other dependencies, and they're also going to bring them in as well. Real quick, so when we ran that npm install.env, it went ahead and created this node modules folder, included the .env, but also it did something else here. A couple other things it did. So we've got this new file package.lock, and it also has this package JSON. Well, we already had this, but if we come in here, you can see now it added a dependency line here. Dependencies.env. This is the latest version of that. Okay, this is the latest version of .env, so it's always going to grab the latest by default. There are commands that you can do when you do an install to grab certain versions if there's a need for that. In the real world, there's situations where you do want to do that. But it'll add it'll add your dependencies, and then also here, what this is doing is actually adding additional information about your install of your .env. Okay. Now, so every time you install another package, it's going to once you do one at the first time, it's going to create your node modules. Anytime you install any other packages, it's going to update this node modules. It's also going to update your package.json file, and it's also going to update this one, right? The first time it will create this, the next install, it's just going to update that, okay? The purpose of the lock one here, that's the reason they probably have lock here is because you really don't want to change it. This is actually, can I do this in here? I don't think so. But here, let me open this in File Explorer, reveal in File Explorer. So here, if I go ahead and right click and do properties on this, I expect it to say read only. Why didn't it say read only? Okay. Oh well. I expect it to say read only. I thought it was read only, but I guess not. Maybe if you close it and reopen it, I don't know. Maybe if you close this project and reopen it, it'll be read only. But basically, you don't want to change this one here. And this does provide a benefit to have this because this one that you put in here, okay, I'll show you how you can reload the node modules based on this, okay? But this one kind of goes into more details, okay? And so what you might want to do here is, you know, this would help when you might have different versions of different ones, and there's other dependencies. This one kind of is more exact, so to speak, okay? Don't get too hung up on that though. But so here's your package.json, you got your dependencies. So here, actually, I can go ahead and delete this. This is needed, but I can delete this. And I'll show you how to recreate it. Because actually, you don't really want to check this in. You don't really want to check this into your repository, because this can be recreated, okay? Because especially here, let me show you something first. So let me install another package so I can show you how this can actually fill up pretty quickly. So I'm going to do npm install nodemon. Like I said, nodemon was one of those packages that were kind of required if you wanted to make changes to your web server. If you get your web server running and you want to make changes, and so it could pick those up without having to restart your web server every time, nodemon was kind of the way to do that. There's other options now. There's another option that's better than that. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and install this one, even though we're not going to be using this. So look what it added. It added 29 packages. So if we go in here to node modules now, look at all this. And that's because these others are all dependencies based on nodemon. So nodemon has all these other dependencies, okay? It has all these other submodules that it needs access to be able to do what it needs to do, okay? So this is one of the reasons you really don't want to check this in, okay? So let me show you. Next, I want to show you what you can do is, if you don't want node modules checked in. So the way to do that is you create a new file, and it needs to be just like this, .get ignore. Okay, and then in your get ignore, you have to do it like this. And let me see. I want to make sure that I'm doing that right here real quick. So for .get ignore, and you need to make sure that you spell it right. Okay. So .get ignore, and then you put that in here, and this will prevent that when you check in your code. It will prevent this from being. It will prevent this from being checked into your repository. Okay, and that's really what you want, how you want to handle that. Also wanted to mention that this .get ignore, so we're putting this right here in this folder. So it's only going to ignore your node modules that's in this folder. If you want to, what's probably better, if you're going to be doing a bunch, you're doing a node React type thing, you probably want to just put that, and you don't want your modules checked in. You probably want to put your .get ignore at the very root directory, so that anytime you have anytime you got no modules in any directory, it's not going to check it in. Okay, so put it at your root directory if you don't want a certain thing checked in any directory. If you want to control it a little more fine-grained, you can go ahead and put it in individual directories, and that's going to pertain just to that specific folder. Okay, so we did that. That's a .get ignore. I did also want to mention here. So let's just say that you check this in, and me as your instructor, I go to grab your repository. So I don't have these node modules. So I'm going to delete this. I'm going to delete this. So I don't have your your node modules. So what I can go ahead and do here is I'll bring in your code, and then what I can do here is just do this: npm install. And what this is going to do, I'm put nothing after it. This is what we did: npm install for nodemon. We did npm install for .env. But if you just do npm install, what it's going to go ahead and do, it's going to come in here to your dependencies, and it's going to install all. It's going to install the dependencies, and it's going to go ahead and create that node modules folder with these dependencies that have been defined. Okay. So there you go, and we're back to our whole node modules thing, okay? And obviously the only reason I included nodemon just to show you the .env, it doesn't have all those crazy dependencies, but nodemon has a significant amount, and that's why you really don't want to check that in. It's just taking up too much space. It's not necessary, okay? And now some other files that you want to maybe include in your .ignore. So let's just say you've got maybe a API key. API keys are kind of things you want to guard, and you don't want to check those in, right? So, there's other things that you don't want. Anything that's, private, any kind of something, sometimes you have to access a database. So you might have database passwords, all kinds of things like that. And that's where you can use what's called a .env file, and that's what the .env was for, is to use a .env file. Okay, so let's just do that. Show you that real quick. So I'm going to right-click here and do a new file, and I'm going to do .env. Okay, and now we got an env file, and so in our server.xml, the way we're using this. And the way this works is you use this process. This is an internal thing that Node uses, process. And so we've got process and this env. Env will actually use the .env package that we installed, and it will grab the port. Okay. So what we're going to want to do here in our env file is we want to create a port. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and come in here, and you have to make sure that the case is the same. Usually people always use uppercase for this, and and you don't want to have spaces or anything. Okay, you want to make sure you do it just like that. And like I said, this is something where you may have an API key or the database username and password, stuff that you don't necessarily want to check in either, right? So now we have that, okay, and so we come over here, so we have both of those. We have our module. Let's see, do we think everything will work? We have our module because we have MJS, so we can do an import. We imported our .env, right? If I would delete the node modules, it's not going to work because the .env, okay? And to create a server, you have to use this. We'll go into this here a little bit in a minute. We have this create server, okay? And then down here, we have this listen, and it's going to be listening on this port. And this code here is kind of a shortcut, right? So basically, this is saying, so you got this variable, constant port, it's saying, hey, if I have a value here, assign that value to port. If I don't, or... right? So if this is true, okay, it's going to assign this. If it's false, it's going to assign this. All right. Or if it doesn't have a port, it's undefined. It can't find it. The whole truthy falsy thing, right? If this returns falsy, right? If this returns falsy, it's going to assign this. So let's go ahead and fire this up and see this work. Okay. So here, what else do I want to do? So what's a common way to start? A common way to start ups is using a startup. Let's just run this node. And we're running server. Server's a common thing, naming for creating a server. So now this is saying that's running on local port right here. And as you can see, it's got 5,000 here. So obviously it was able to read that and grab that out of there and assign that to port. So let me grab this real quick. And let's just go over here. Hello from Node.js server. So it worked, right? It worked. So let's go back in here just for the heck of it and put a breakpoint here. Put a breakpoint here. Okay. So once you have the server running, and here, so this is another thing, you know, I kind of wanted to mention, easy to make this mistake a lot. So if I end up creating a new terminal up here on the right, if you can see on the right hand side here, you actually can create a new terminal here. So you got a second terminal. So if I kind of try to do this, you're going to get an error. You're going to see this. I'm guarantee at some point or another, you're going to end up with this. You know, whenever you see errors like this, you know, kind of go up to the top here, start from the top, you know, see what it says, and, you know, come down from that. You know, you might not understand what the first thing means, but here, address already in use. Address is already in use. So, and especially when you do web servers, you can't once you assign something to a port, you can't use that port again, right? Not unless you restart it, right? So there are servers running. So I'm going to kill this. Just an easy mistake to make, especially when you start up a server and then you find an error and you start fixing some things. Obviously, it'll you sometimes get confused and you're doing different things and you end up starting it up again and you're going to see that error. What else did I want to mention here? Okay, so we'll go ahead and put the breakpoints here. Let's go ahead and get rid of kill this server. So right now this is running, right? This is a running process. It's just sitting there waiting for a request to come in. Your request is coming in basically from here, right? From the browser. So I'm going to kill this for right now. Just Control C, right? Control C, and then it quit the server. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to do a F5. We're going to do node here on this. And just to show you, probably should have put a breakpoint here. Let me kill this again. So let's F5. So what's going to happen in here, it's going to come in this, you know, obviously it did the imports. It's going to come in here to server. It's going to create the server, right? But these things here are part of a callback, which has a request and a response. Okay, it has a request and a response object, and that's typical. That's how you create a server. You're always going to have a request and you're going to have a response. Okay, your request is obviously coming from the browser. Since this is an HTTP server, your request is coming from your browser. Your response, you're creating your response and sending it back to the browser, right? Now, as you can see, it executes this line. These are not going to be executed right now. It's going to come back. It's going to come back down here, and it's going to do this listen. Okay, it's going to do this listen. So I'm going to continue here. All right, I'm going to continue there, and it just logged this out. Okay, I'm going to continue here, and now it's just sitting here. The server is running. If I come in here and click and go ahead and refresh this, boom. So you got this listener. It's going to constantly listening on the port, and this callback function is not going to get executed until a request comes in. Once I went ahead and refreshed that page, the request came in. It's going to write this header. Then it's going to go ahead and basically what this does, this end thing, it's gonna put whatever's in here, and it's gonna send this back to the calling, which was the browser, right? So obviously if I click that, it's going to go ahead and execute all of that. So where you also want to do things is like, so this is, you're setting up content 200. 200 means a good request. So basically, if you've made it to this point, it's a good request. So it can find it, right? If it can't find it, let me do something here. So we got our browser still running. Let me try something here real quick. So do that. All right, I just want to go through this whole thing. So what if I do something that doesn't exist? If I do something that don't exist, now I'm going to hit enter. Well, in this case, even though it doesn't exist, you have to define things that don't exist. Like a 404, so 200 is a good one. 404 means not found, right? So you have to program all of that. I was just kind of wondering if I was going to get a different response than that, and I didn't, because you got to really program that. So the important thing is just kind of review this one here real quick, what we kind of did here. First of all, kind of showed you, you got this here. This is when it says Node, when it's prefixed here with Node, you know this is a Node, a built-in Node module, right? You don't have to do anything. You don't have to install this. It's already there available for you to use. The second one is the .env, right? And so this .env, this is a third-party library. And so you have to do the npm install .env for that to come in. And to access, then you need to create a .env file. Make sure you start with the dot. It won't work without the dot. And then also you have to use this structure as far as process.env. And then in here you can have other things as well, right? And like I said, usually you make this stuff all uppercase. Equals and whatever, your API key is. Usually going to put this in a quote. But you can have all other things as well. And like I said, there's stuff in here that you don't want to commit to your repository. So you basically can come in here, and also here you could just go ahead and do .env. Yep, .env, and then this is also not going to in git ignore, and that way it won't put it in your repository as well. What else did we talk about here? So obviously, like I said, if you go ahead and do the .git ignore, it's not going to put your node modules in there. And then what I will do as an instructor, I'm going to come in here and basically, I'll basically do a npm install, and that will go ahead and load everything, all the dependencies that are defined in your package.json file. Okay. So one other thing I want to show you here. Okay, so what you can also do here, so let me just let's restart this again. And Let's bring up the web server. All right, so that's that. So if I change the name in here of something, let me go to my server. We change the name of something in here. Let me change the name. Change anything. When I save this, I refresh this, it's not going to show up here, right? As long as the server's running. So another thing you can do here on this, and some of the stuff you can, and I'll show you later, some of the stuff we can put in the package.json file, so that you don't have to run this command line all the time. There's some things you can put in the JSON file to start up web servers. We'll look at that more tomorrow. But here what we can do is go ahead and do this. Do node -- watch. And this is a little newer feature in more recent versions. And then I'm going to do like that. Node.watch server.js. And I think this should work for us. So now it's running. So if I go in here, well, let's go back to what that was. If I hit refresh here, okay. If I go ahead and restarting, okay. So let me go in here and do put this again back in there again, and I hit save. It's done. Restart it, and then if I hit refresh, still have to hit refresh, but you don't have to restart the server, right? You have to hit refresh. But you don't have to restart the server. It'll restart the server automatically, is what I should say. Obviously, we'll have to hit refresh. So that way you can change things and automatically be able to see the results. All right. So I know we went through a lot of different things here. Don't get hung up on a lot of this, and a lot of the assignments are pretty much cut and paste. You just have to, have Node installed. You have to spend a little time. You have to do some things in the terminal and things like that. Just please let me know if you have any problems. I'll help you out. No problem with that. But, the whole idea here, you're not going to become an expert in this in a week. And just, try to get a little more familiarity with this. And it'll be very beneficial for the students who are going to be moving into the database-driven 1 course in the summer. And then obviously the other students, the other few students who will be doing the C#, it'll be a little delayed benefit for you guys. So thanks a lot, and have a good one.